Don Cotman was born and raised in St. Louis and received his BFA in drawing and painting from the University of Kansas. He continued his westward migration to Seattle, where he earned an MFA at the University of Washington. Currently, he divides his time between Kansas City and Alberta, Canada, where he teaches at the Alberta College of Art and Design. In 2015, Cotman received the prestigious Joan Mitchell Foundation Award. Like Joan Mitchell's work, Cotman's paintings fuse gesture, abstraction, and color to create complicated works pulsating with thoughtful energy in a manner perhaps somewhat reminiscent of the velvety richness of Arshile Gorky. We are fortunate to have the current Don Cotman exhibition, Everything, Nothing, Something, on view in the Nerman Museum's Kansas Focus Gallery, consisting of 20 small sketchbook drawings torn from the artist's notebooks he has filled over the years. Bruce Hartman, director of the Nerman Museum, said of Cotman's paintings that they resonate with his love of gesture, color, and the unexpected, qualities we see in the drawings on view downstairs as well. Please join me in welcoming Don Cotman.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. Appreciate that. And we'll have to talk more about Gorky. Bruce, magnificent maestro, Bruce Hartman, I hope you're in the room. The diversity of your curatorial choices amazes me, knowing the tablets you've gone through. The sight line along the gallery, the rhythm, the cadence, the way it works, thank you. Alice Thorson, hopefully the drawings rise to the ease and beauty and clarity of your writing. Thank you for your continued support. Art Miller, thank you very much. Whitney, Hama, Katie, E.G. Schempf for these photographs of the gallery, which I really appreciate installation shots because I never take them and I never have a record, so it's so nice to see that. And Catherine Morris for taking me through this PowerPoint lesson in the last couple days. Couldn't have done any of this without her, or Katie now. And there will be two other photographers, Richard Welnowski, a dear friend, and Carmela de Flumery also took some photographs. And I wish to talk about some important moments in my student days while at KU, which is probably the reason I'm in the KU Focus Gallery, or Kansas Focus Gallery, I'm sorry, is I'm the prodigal son and back. Everything, Nothing, Something germinated as a student at KU. It became part of my philosophical location. It became a way that I could make myself accountable to things. Yes, I was learning how to see, how to draw, how to work, look at observation, but I needed more. I wanted more fundamentals. I wanted more foundation. So I sort of invented, well, I did invent the idea of everything, nothing, something. And that triad, that trinity has worked for me in so many ways, and I can use that template on any number of things. For instance, the blank page that these notebooks are filled with, they start out as a kind of nothing, and then ideally they become a possible everything. And somewhere in between there is something, although one of the reasons I use the notebook is it's pre-lined and it's perforated, and I like the instantaneousness of it and the ease of it, and it takes away the sacred cow of the white paper. So it already is a kind of nothing something before I get to have the possible everything in it. This is a painting that just turned 50 this year, and I did this at KU, And I've had this hanging above my bed in my residence here in Kansas City. It's the only thing I have left from those years. My brother had it. We moved it here when I moved here in 2008. And I think it's affected what you're seeing down in that gallery. That stack of red and blue right there in the center, I think, has been working on me for 9 years here. And it's probably shown up in these works, or at least I give this some credit for it. The other thing the everything, nothing, something refers to is the abstraction. Abstraction's a kind of nothing when you think about it. Compared to figuration, representational work, and narrative work, abstraction starts from a something nothing, absolutely nothing, and it comes toward everything. That really fascinates me, and I like the idea of that very, very much, that it can go from nothing to something to everything, right in front of your eyes. So I was searching as a student for more sustenance, more foundation, something I could really stand on. And as much as the observation, the seeing, and the working helped me locate, I needed more. So I came up with another thing that it germinated, and it's still with me to this day. And that's the three big realities, I call them. It seems like everything comes in threes. By the way, this was an installation at the Old Dolphin on Baltimore in 2004. This is my first show, really, of any here in Kansas City, although I was in the Mid-America one year. These are 233 paintings on Calgary Sun newspapers, which is a tabloid in Calgary. And again, it breaks down the sacred cow of the white because it's already has an architectural sort of narrative going, a found ready-made, if you will, that I could paint on, and I could participate with, against, go toward, go away from. It was a kind of a shimmering Byzantine effect in there. It was, I thought, quite lovely. This is, I'm fast forwarding. I don't have images at this time of anything that's on slide. So it's all whatever's gotten on the computer. So I've gone back and forth from abstraction to figuration probably 4 times in my career. I've done black paintings, poured paintings, drip paintings, sprayed paintings, you name it, with abstraction, trying to find my voice and find myself. In 2012, I had this show at Leedy Volkus, and thank you, Stephanie Leedy. And by the way, thank you, John O'Brien, if you're in the room for the Dolphin show, and Aaron Woodworth as well. This is in the gallery, obviously, while I'm chatting. So the other thing that germinated while at KU, and even though I'm just a few years back right now, and I'm talking about something 50 years ago, and I brought forward, is the big 3 realities. And the big 3 realities for me are the color, the paint, and the support. Everything else is an act of will by the artist, but those things are real. They exist. In spite of the artist, whatever, they are real. Color is real, the paint is real, the support is real. That was really important to me, very important to me. Because as I was saying a moment ago, I could land on that, I could participate with those realities. There was so much talk of artsy-fartsy, fuzzy-wuzzy stuff about art, and maybe there still is. But I wanted to clear that. I wanted to be larger than that, and as big as life, as real as life. And I wanted to use those realities to substantiate and build my career on, which I knew I was going to be doing this for a long time, that long ago, and here I am. This is Lulu Louise. This is one of the paintings that was submitted for the Joan Mitchell. This is Night of Its Dream, also submitted for the Joan Mitchell. See some reeds. And I think you can see the beginnings in these of the piling, layering, stacking, shelving of the very bands that I found my way back to. Always in paint, I never lead with a conceptual idea. The paint leads me. The painting process leads me. So I follow the bliss of that in my studio. These stackings, these events, all this stuff takes me somewhere. I have no idea where I'm going. In fact, often I start a painting not knowing what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it. And I like that unknown very much. That way I can be absolutely in that moment that I was just describing to you with color, paint, and support. And I love the color of color, and I love looking down the throat of color. This is Golden Fleece that was also in that Lady Volkus show. This is Lagoon. And now something that started happening here, and I think structure is one of the biggest things that I search for as a painter, is how does the thing structure itself? And I'm looking for not only the color of the color and the support and how it works, the fabric, and I always leave a bit of it sitting somewhere where it's visible, like a city. There's older parts, newer parts, even more modern parts. There's a history to each painting, like a city being architecturally built from 18 whatever, like Kansas City. So that's important to see those layers come through and what takes place. But what was starting to happen is I was opening up the middle of the canvas. Normally you put your thing of interest in the middle. I took it out and put the organic stage left form and an organic stage right form. Let me go back to some of these others that show it. And then a gravity poured center. And that was really a big deal structurally. That was kind of, again, like the big three. So I had a left, stage right, and a center stage. And that structurally was satisfying. And I could play all my threes off of that. The everything, nothing, something three, the spatial possibilities, and the alignment. And I called all this and talked about this as the space between. It would be like me and Catherine standing here in the space between us, and that was the space that I was trying to put down the middle of the painting and playing with. That empty void, that nothing that could become a something. And you can't always stay with everything. This is called catastrophe. This is cauldron. I think you can see the remnants of the stage left figure, stage right figure, and the gravity poured middle. Although appendages start reaching out. It's like reaching out to shake someone's hand, and they reach out to shake yours across that void, across that space. And that space was a big deal, and I really want that space. And that was the thing with the color, by the way, the big three. There was a big fourth that surprised me early on, that 50 years ago now. So we got the color of the color, we got the paint, and the process of paint, and the manipulation of paint, the handling of paint, and we have the support, and I've shown these hanging just freely or stretched, and it really becomes obvious when you show them just hanging freely, the fabric, the fiber, the cotton duck. But the big fourth was space. Now you'd say, oh, well, isn't that an act of will to put space into a painting? Isn't that an act of intention? And I would submit this. Two reds, same red, one red here, one red here. Identical. They find the picture plane, the flatness of the picture plane. Change one of the reds, what happens? Something's got to give. Something takes place. This is a good example because in this painting I've tried 3 different reds across here just to telescope it across. And there's the appendage that crosses from stage right to stage left, and the organic forms on each side. So there it was. Space was essential. Without space, in fact, I think all the greatest paintings ever made have all 4 of those big 3 plus the 4th. And I've visited a lot of museums all over the world. Every time I go, every time I see it, and they start operating, that's what they got for sure. That's just for openers, those realities, that substantialness, that location. This is another one of the paintings for the Joan Mitchell. This was the first sediments painting. This is where the piling and almost the striping that was 50 years earlier came back without me even, I wasn't even thinking about it. I wasn't trying to mine it again. There it was. There it was operating. Here again, the stacking, the shelves, the folding, the folds. I got ahead of my paper here. Oh, I got to go back just for a second. That one, Lazarus Green. Periodically, a painting dies. It happens. That it doesn't go the way you want it to. You get it just to where you think it's operational. You push and push, but you push it too far. You kill it. Or it doesn't fulfill itself. It kills that way. It dies. It just has a deathing right in front of you. I love that moment, actually. Because now, guess what I get to do? Re-enter the painting, resuscitate it, resurrect it, and try to bring it back to life. That's the most rewarding part. I almost look for the paintings to go under so I can resuscitate them and resurrect them. It's really emotionally satisfying, and it helps with all the ingredients I've already mentioned. And that's why I called that one Lazarus Green, because it started in 2004, and I don't think it got done until 2011. And I just kept pulling it out, trying it again and again. So these are still the Lidi Vulcus. Okay, the one on the left was also, that wasn't Lidi Vulcus, that's later. This is my studio. This photo is by Richard Welnowski. And this is Adam's son, another one of the Joan Mitchells. So there was these spherical events, and I had painted ovoids before all this in the mid-90s up until about the 2004 show at the John O'Brien. I'm sorry I'm bouncing around a bit here. And the ovoids of color were like flash bulbs of color, just trying to locate and find space and figure out the void and figure out the nothingness. Another studio shot. These paintings all ended up in various shows over the years. The one on the left made the Joan Mitchell cut, I believe. So these were in my show in Calgary in 2014, a Stride show. Some of the stage left stuff was still resonating, but the bands were really starting to come on now, and a lot of different stuff was happening that maybe you can recognize down in the drawing show in some way. I don't know which is first, the drawing or the painting. They seem to bounce back and forth. Another one from that show back in 2014. Then there was a show at another Calgary gallery in 2015. And while this show was being put up, I had a knee operation and came in to see it that way in a wheelchair. And missed my show, and this is called Witness, where the bands are really starting to take on a fundamental location. The stage left, organic form, and right are pretty well gone, just like they are down in the drawings. And this was from that show, Witness Rose Symphony, in Masters in 2015. This is called Sequoia. There's just stuff, loose stuff that happens. Things happen. Pink Purse, Aida. This is my place. The one on the far right is one of the ovoid paintings that came before 2004, around 2002 or so. And then Sediments is right behind me. some more work that never has been exhibited, never came out of the studio until right now, I guess. Crescent something or other. Southwest something or other. Tower something or other. Actually, the genesis of this painting was Times Square. And I loved how the sky came down on each side of that one building that has all that stuff going on it. Well, they all do, but. And this kind of Moses Reed basket here showed up in a lot of paintings. And I go back to it, it's a kind of weave. I don't know what it, I'm not positive about its necessity yet. This was the 215 show at Todd Weiner Invite. And this was the mother painting that sort of well, I'll leave it at that. What was this one? Red Stitch something? Or two yellows? I don't know. Who coined the stitch word, Alice, you or I? I like it. This is Primary Matters. The show was called Primary Matters. This is the painting. Gray matter, trois bleu. This is the latest stuff. I've decided to stand with it. These are just handheld phone, just to give you an idea of the size. We're out? It's 20? I think the Kaufman Center somehow had something to do with this one. The double whammy up the top. But also the Chinooks of Calgary had a lot to do with that, because I've always thought of it as a log, an amber log across the sky, and the warm air comes over the Rockies, and the cold air holds it down and in, and the temperature changes 25 degrees in an hour. Both of these were devoted to the fires. This one had something to do with the... I don't want to tell you that about him. I'm sorry. That's my dog, Otto. He's a miniature dachshund. And then back to the drawings, which are downstairs for your viewing pleasure. And these are will be the two entries in the Dazzling show. Bruce picked them both out. And unfortunately, Dazzle doesn't show up in slide form. The reflectability and the flash of it is just muted. And there's the booklet again. Last one. Thank you.
Karen McCoy is an American visual artist whose work focuses on sculpture, environmental art, walking art, and land art. She resides in Kansas City, Missouri, where she's a professor in the sculpture department at the Kansas City Art Institute. She has taught sculpture and design at Williams College, Colby College, and the University of Minnesota Morris. Karen McCoy's primary work for the last 2 decades has been large-scale, sited environmental sculpture. McCoy focuses on the relationship between nature and culture, creating work based on extensive research into the geological, cultural, and social histories of each site. She also works in video, photography, installation, and makes drawings and prints. McCoy's sculptural works have been described as, quote, being created out of a combination of artistic practice and environmental activism, with focus on the ecological, geographical, cultural, and societal histories of the site at which the work is created. McCoy describes her own work as follows. Quote, I explore how we experience place and person by amplifying and intensifying ordinary phenomenon, things for everyone to see, but so woven into the fabric of the everyday that they are not usually noticed. I have had a continuing involvement in making work that undergoes or alludes to physical change as an echo of the constant flux of the world and its processes that relate to human memory, history, and action, and is informed by a cultural and political consciousness. What I would say of her work as an ecologist and environmental scientist is that it's enriching, profound, provocative, and environmentally conscious. Her work will literally fill up your senses. It will draw you in and invite you to ponder global questions, and she does so by using reclaimed materials to create, quote, large-scale sculptures that address issues on global climate change, sustainability, and resource depletion. Please welcome Karen McCoy.
You good? Yeah. Thank you, Deb, for that gracious introduction, and thank you for inviting me to come and speak here, Bruce, wherever you are. And it's great to see so many friends here. I'm going to start by looking at a few pieces from my history to sort of establish what I've done over the long haul. This is part of a big project that took place over 75 acres. It was called Considering Mother's Mantle, named for a geological term, the soil mantle, which is a very thin layer of soil over a bedrock base. It was in upstate New York, and I simply waded into the pond and transplanted the arrowleaf plants into a grid. Another part of the piece were braided meadow grasses around the pond. I braided them into the form of cul-de-sacs and dead ends. The people there that I talked to about the landscape, about their fears for their own homes, said the thing that they were most concerned about was overdevelopment, that they would become a bedroom community for nearby Syracuse. So this is a form that's emblematic of suburban development, particularly in the United States. And the gridded pond is very sort of tongue-in-cheek. Well, if we use up all the land, not to worry, we can just start filling in the water and use that as well, which, of course, we've done many times. This is Uprooted. It was made in the same year I moved to Kansas City, 1994. So it's a bit of a self-portrait. I was feeling a bit uprooted from my beloved New England, but at the same time extremely excited about moving to Kansas City and to the Art Institute. So it's also a sort of homage to the uprootedness of craft worldwide. This piece was made in Lithuania a few years later. It's called Space for Contemplating Lithuania. All the while the snails crawled. I was walking in the forest trying to understand what I might make in this place, meeting a lot of people. Almost everyone had a fairly traumatic story, had a relative who was deported to Siberia. At the time I was working, Lithuania had only come out from under communist rule 2 or 3 years. So I made a contemplation space. You walk counterclockwise to the interior. It's about 8 feet tall. And you might sit in the middle with a few friends. You can see upward, but not laterally. And when you leave, you walk out clockwise and rejoin the world's time. In 2014, I'm jumping now ahead to more recent work, which is what I'd really like to talk about. And so that was just a bit of background. I was on leave in Italy, the northern part of Italy, the northwest part near Genoa, and I did most of my work walking around. And I could see down into these abandoned terraced agrarian landscapes and for the vineyards and the olive groves. As I walked, I was walking on paths that looked a lot like this. They're called the Clusa, and they're generally made traditionally of brick and stone, so they're permeable. All of those stone walls are dry stone masonry, probably 900 years old, some of them. So any water that's rain, snow melt, and so on is slowly, slowly percolating through the soil. When we start to develop the landscape, when we build condominiums, when we build roads to get there instead of using hand carts as they were doing on the Clusa, the water movement changes mysteriously underground. This was a landslide that happened next door to the Bogliasco Foundation where I was working. Not a huge landslide. No one was killed as far as I know, but 7 or 8 families who probably had lived in these homes for hundreds of years were displaced. It was disquieting every day to walk by and see the doors chained with big aviso signs on the doors, and to see changes in the destruction of those homes every day. So I began in my small studio to make pour drawings that were responding to this situation of living next door to a landslide. And this is one of the very first one. I'm using earth pigments that I found while walking, and I'm also making egg tempera with those found pigments. So at the top of this one, I've depicted one of the agrarian walls beginning to crumble, and the whole situation, the tenuousness or fragility of it, is kind of indicated by the sewing together of the parts of the drawing with thread. I made many, these are actually quite small, studies of the landslides, pours, using the egg tempera while I was there. And when I came home, everyone was talking about the drought in California and the landslides in Colorado. So this is a diptych called Colorado and California. The California piece is made of egg tempera paste, which is something I'm just sort of pioneering. I don't know if anybody ever actually made that. Probably they did, and sort of built a drawing with it. I've made many of these landslide pour drawings. These are about 36 inches tall. I made a lot that are 63 inches, which is my height. This is a double pour using earth from Arkansas and Louisiana. I grew up in Louisiana. Another double pour, the same height, 63. Quite a few of them I've sanded as well. I've poured layers and then used an electric sander on them. I tend to be really physical with my drawings. I guess it's just being a sculptor and really liking to move things around. This is another one that's been sanded. This is a slide from some more recent research. I began to think about the cause of global climate change, which is very related to these landslides. This is a compacted bale that weighs a couple of tons of children's stuffed animals that I photographed at the local Salvation Army warehouse. So the stuffed animals are now being made in China so cheaply that they can't really sell them even at 69 cents a piece from a bin. So they're shipping them primarily to South America. I was asked about a year ago to do a project for the National Ceramics Conference at the Steamboat Arabia Museum, which is a very fine private little museum in the River Market in Kansas City. If you haven't been there, I encourage you to go. There are about 3,000 shoes, there are mirrors, there are buckets. It's all consumer goods from the eve of the Civil War. And about 6 months ago, I was doing some research, and I came across this drawing by Leonardo da Vinci from 1510. It's in the Windsor Castle collection, and it's called A Cloudburst of Personal Possessions. So this has been an ongoing theme. And I indeed made an avalanche or a landslide of contemporary consumer goods at the Steamboat Arabia Museum. And they also allowed me to do a few interventions in their collection, marking objects that we had in common. I had a lot of bill caps in my installation, and they had a lot of black felt hats. I had flatware, it was plastic. I had takeout containers, clamshells as bowls. And so we were asking viewers to begin to make connections between the two sculptural installations. I wanted very much to have a game, and I had never done anything like this, and so I just took a plunge, and it was called Consuming Questions and Connections. And it was questions that we might ask ourselves when we're making purchases. What is this made of? How long will it last? Where did it come from? What will happen to it when I'm done with it? Is it necessary? how much do we think about each item we buy, and what is the relationship between the way we purchase, use, and dispose of goods and climate change? So there was also a set of tear sheets for children or people of any age to note the connections that they could see between the two installations, note the materiality of it, perhaps discern some of the implications, and a more open or whimsical format as well, and I love that drawing that was left for me. So when the piece left the Steamboat Arabia, it went to the surplus exchange down in the West Bottoms. And there we also were allowed to do some interventions. So the surplus exchange is Kansas City's regional electronics recycling place. And they have a great relationship with the Kansas City community. Not only do they take in our computers and our cell phones and our printers and our keyboards, they also take our office furniture and try to turn that over. They asked me, they gave me some keyboards and printers for the original installation, and they asked me to please sign a full circle agreement. And I said, what is that? And they said, well, you have to agree that you'll bring the stuff back to us if you ever take the sculpture apart. And I said, well, even if it's covered in mud? And they said, yep. So we had a good laugh that I did bring everything back, but not in a way that anyone thought we would. So this is what that piece looks like. And it often, you can see a keyboard here. So it's Missouri mud. It's the subsoil, stabilized with polyvinyl acetate, which is a biodegradable, though petroleum byproduct. It often looks like this when I go there. The office furniture is just crowding into it. And while I find it aesthetically somewhat distressing, conceptually, I find it like right on, you know? It's like, what's happening? So my obsession and interest with my own consumption predates Consuming Questions, the piece that we've just been looking at. In 2007, I began to make this work called Seemingly Unconnected Events. And it's composed of organic forms and plaster and plaster casts of taken in my consumer goods packaging. Just a few images. That was an iteration that was out at the Epstein Gallery at Village Shalom, not too far from here. So in 2006, late in the year, I read Elizabeth Kolbert's article, The Darkening Sea, and she explained to me about ocean acidification, about the reciprocity between the air, the atmosphere, and the sea, and how because the atmosphere is becoming supersaturated with CO2, the ocean can't absorb it all anymore. So the ocean is changing as well and becoming acidic. So, for example, we all know that the Great Barrier Reef of coral near Australia is deteriorating, is dying much more rapidly than we ever thought it would. So Kolbert was writing about pteropods, a tiny creature. But I was very interested in Hydroides dianthus, this very tiny, low on the food chain sea worm that makes these beautiful, sinuous habitat casings, also calcium-based. I was at the time teaching mold making at the Art Institute and alternative mold making. So we were using all sorts of plastics and synthetics and silicones, and we didn't have proper ventilation. And I began to say, I don't want to do this. It's not good for the students. It's probably not good for me. It's probably not good for who's producing it. So I began to explore alternatives, even to the alternatives. And I came up with using newspaper. And I began to sew these molds. And then I would cast inside these tubes, this is how I create those organic forms. We burn the mold to get rid of all the cords and to weaken the paper, and then forcibly pull the paper off the plaster cast. And I've also gotten very interested in some of these stages of the process, and we'll be employing some of those in an upcoming installation. But that creates these forms of the sea worms, which for me are just icons of the organic world. So this is the kind of packaging that I'm talking about, the non-recyclable packaging that I then, like a light bulb on the far right, cast the plaster into. Now, the first time I was invited to install this piece was at this house, which is a state historic mansion, a pre-revolutionary home called the Wentworth Coolidge site in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And it is sited on a bay of the Atlantic Ocean, which is where the sea worms were collected, those samples that I showed you that were my inspiration. There were 35 artists in the show, and the house had amazing things like this sunken brick French kitchen that had warming niches outside in the hall. And you can see I began to colonize the niches in much the same way as the Hydroides dianthes colonized the clamshell. This is a closet that I worked in, and the back of the closet was blocked off, and we had a projection from the seawater. This was called New Sea Level. At the foot of the stairway where the projection was located, I discovered a hatch and was allowed to crawl down in there and explore on one of my site visits. It was a stone chamber with a dirt floor about 6 by 8. No one knew what it was. Was it a root cellar? Was it a site on the Underground Railroad? Did they hide their booze there during the Prohibition? Maybe everything. We don't know. So I installed a new door on it with bulletproof glass about 3/4 of an inch so you could walk on it, and it had hand-cranked flashlights so viewers could peer down and see part of the installation and into a sort of subterranean aspect of the house. When you first went into my major room, you would look down into this sort of creepy stairwell, and the sound coming from it was the sound of the ocean combined with sounds of traffic. And then you entered my major room. Our deal with the Historic Society was we could move anything around in our room, but we couldn't take anything out. So I had ships and a natural diorama in there and paintings of the ocean. And I did make some new stands for a couple of the ships, so they sort of were brought into the installation. And the consumer goods and the organic forms sort of cohabited with the past and the viewers that were the present, and I guess maybe with all of our future. While I was working out at the Epstein, I made that first installation that I just showed you, the big pile that looked like it was just washed up. I asked if I could use the space to just play around and make some other iterations. My own studio is quite modest, and I hadn't really gotten to do that with the objects. So this was just another variation, and in fact a few others, the wedge, cubed. And I will be showing another iteration in the fall at the Land Institute out in Salina, Kansas. And this is a shot in their greenhouse. They do research on the future of food. For a very long time, I've been interested in listening. When I was in elementary school, we spent a whole year doing nothing but talking about listening. And it's really affected me as an artist. And some of these things that people have done in order to hear better are pretty amazing and funny to me. And I have made a ton of listening pieces myself, and I did a lot of research in the West Central School for the Deaf in St. Louis, looking at early instruments for hearing. My own family often has hearing difficulties in old age. So that was under the Brooklyn Bridge. This is the sound stations in the Crossroads right here. This is a pair of sponges modified for listening to the ocean at Key West. Now, all of those were anchored, some of them more completely, some of them with just rope. But I had long wanted to do some pieces where people could just take them on a walk. So in 2013, I was asked to be an artist in residence in the Blue Ridge Mountains near Charlottesville, Virginia. And so we took the guests that were there at the music festival on listening walks. My partner, Robert Carl, and I worked together to plot the walks. This was a set of 10 hand-carved wooden burl listening trumpets. And I went two summers ago to work with the Walking Artists Network in the UK. And here we are taking a long walk in Wales. And then I was invited to come to New York City and lead a walk with the Walk Exchange. And I chose the north end of Central Park, particularly the part called the Ravine, which was designed by Olmsted as a kind of sound sanctuary. And it still works that way to a certain extent today. This is the lock 3 days before our walk. And the intrepid New Yorkers showed up with the right footgear, and we succeeded in listening. And at this particular site, you could hear the water under the ice only with the listening device. You couldn't hear it at all without the amplification the little wooden trumpets provided. Since that time, I've led 2 other walks with Parsons School of Design students who are in a walking as research class. The students often turn them the other way and use them as a sighting device as well. And so they have these little temporary snapshots to take away in their memories or in their cameras. Did one on Lake Michigan in Chicago. And I most recently was asked to make a contribution to a little book called Ways to Wander. And so I made this paper trumpet based on looking at these rock formations in Wales. And you can roll it up and listen with it. This is a more recent sample that I made to take with me. I often have a very modest studio. If I have a table, I have a studio. This is in Greece last summer. We were finding pigments on a pigment walk. Then everyone made a memory drawing on a fan-shaped piece of paper using pigments we found on the first walk. And we took a walk in Delphi, in the archaeological site, listening to the springs and to the landscape. That's at the Tholos in Delphi. That's it. Thank you.
What is this active will or this space between? It's so mysterious to me.
The space between or the active will?
Oh, well, I mean, again, it's not an either or, and I wish I could reduce things to either ors. And then it'd be like, either I fell off.
Well, the space between just became, from me, observing life, really.
Yeah.
Like Allison's here, and I think I try to describe that by, this is the space between, right? We all face this every day of our lives. The space between everything. Me and this bottle, the mic, Allison and I. And the reaching across for that gave me a reason to put paint there relative to your question back to the abstract nothing void that this represents in the painting. Although there is no nothing ever. There's always something. Even the plain paper is so beautiful and pristine, as is raw canvas. Before you even touch it, it's gorgeous. But I embrace the unknown. I embrace all my doubts. I bring them forward. Maybe this is getting at your question better. I have no fear any longer. I don't know that if I ever did. But the big 3 and the big 4th gave me permission to go ahead at everything. Full speed ahead. And if I get lost, if I get confused, if I find myself in chaos, all I have to do is step back for a moment. And frankly, I think all of us have this capacity when we're viewing art or viewing our own work. All we have to do is stand with it for a moment and witness it, look at it, observe it, and we'll find a way into it. Even if we're uninitiated in art, I believe the lay person can do this. So we get to be special with it. We've studied it. We go after it. We pursue it. In my case, with great rigor. So I go right at that unknown, right at that void, right at that doubt. And I use those in my work. I use those in the drawings. And then if I have a problem, I just flip the page and move on with the drawings. do the same with painting, frankly, but you can always come back to it. If you destroy it or kill it, you resurrect it, you resuscitate it. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, see, I didn't really have a question. I thank you for your thoughts. I'm also very interested in this idea of painting dying.
Painting what?
Painting dying.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that great?
I would wonder when that inflection point would occur. In a painting. I mean, it's probably not. You're probably not able to generalize that specifically because I mean, every painting is unto itself a painting, perhaps. But the notion of a painting dying, and then that you would have to actually imbue life into it. Because sometimes when I paint, I feel like sometimes I just hate it. After I get to a certain point, I can't stand looking at it.
Oh, I know.
And,
And you roll them up and put them away, and I put out another one. And then you work on that one until you kill that one. And then you roll that one out, put that one away, and pull out another one.
what is it to kill a painting?
Pardon me?
What is it to kill a painting?
It doesn't work. It gets too pat. It becomes too much of something other than what could be the energy that it needs to be inevitable. It has to find its inevitableness to work. It has to understand its totality to work. And any number of tiny little nothings can tear it down. So everything has to come together. Every neighbor color, every neighbor visceral passage, everything has to work with everything else all across the whole thing. So to get that to happen, that's really, the odds are against us. So that's where now you learn how to read your work, you learn how to see it, you learn how to look at it and then give it what it needs. Trying to do that before you kill it. But killing it's pretty cool. Because now you really do get it, and I mean this, you really get an opportunity to come back to it, and there it is, and it really is a resurrection. It's like putting that back into it.
Wow, that's cool.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for your question. That was good. I don't know if I even got near
Well,
it.
see, again, I wasn't even really asking a question. I'm really glad for the elaboration because I found this very fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I took a lot of time there.
Any other questions?
How does it feel to fill up one of those steno pads?
I never use the word fill to describe my work. I never think of it that way. But I know what you mean. You know, it's a word we use to talk about pictures and such. But, yeah, it's kind of rewarding, you know. How many did I hand you, Bruce, for you to curate that?
Mine's under 100 per steno pad.
It's close. I'd say it's 85%. 90% of drawings in it, yeah, at least, yeah. There's 100 pages.
50 to 900.
Yeah, so he curated that down. That's why I said he's like this magician curator. I couldn't believe and how he located all the diversity that I think is in those books. It was masterful, but it feels good to fill those tablets. Yeah, it feels good to like shut one and open another one. It always does.
Having selected those pieces, honestly, as we began to remove them, you almost felt like you were violating the integrity of the sketchbook, and yet
You were.
proceeded.
I wasn't here for that.
We had the artist's permission, however.
Yeah.
I had a question for Karen. It seems like there's no limit to the materials that you work with. You know, with nature, having an incredible diversity of materials. Is there any material that you have worked with that you just didn't pursue because it just didn't do what you wanted it to do?
Yeah, it's funny to say this, having just shown you a 26 to 30 foot long piece made out of clay, but clay. For a while, I studied ceramics, and I was always trying to do things with clay that just didn't work out. My ideas just couldn't somehow be borne out with that material. I was always dripping on it and trying to, see it change, and I don't know. So, yeah. I've been known to say I hate clay, but it's kind of a joke. I know. I know. But so for me, it was hard to make sculpture with it, and throwing wasn't, it was wonderfully soothing, but it just didn't go anywhere for me. I love a lot of ceramics, but for me as an artist to restrict myself to that medium, it made me sort of hate it when I was taking classes as a student. I would never have said that if you hadn't asked that question.
Great question for you, Sharon. I was wondering if Andy Curley had any influence on your beginning pieces that you showed us?
Yeah, I mean, I love his work. I remember when I first saw it in the first edition of Earthworks and Beyond, was him tossing these things in the air and just this snapshot of that moment. And I was kind of dubious, right? And I have to say, he has so, amazed me by the kind of variation he has achieved over the long years of his career with a very limited outline of, what he's willing to do. So if you think about the beginnings of artists working in the landscape, right? In this country, I mean, we're not talking prehistory, I'm talking about with contemporary art. We had the earthworks artists, right? We had Robert Smithson with the spiral jetty, Nancy Holt with the sun tunnels, and concrete poetry in the landscape. But in the UK, we had artists like Richard Long, and Hamish Fulton, who were taking walks and making photographs. And in fact, most of the early earth artists or land artists, depending on what you call them, were men. And I used to always ask that, what were the women doing? Why are the early earth artists men? And the answer basically was women were trying to get into the museum. The last thing they wanted to do was go out in the landscape and make work whose purpose was that it couldn't hang on a wall over a sofa or whatever. So that's always been very interesting to me about how land art began in Europe and how earth art began here. That we were using large earth-moving equipment, dynamite even, in the case of Michael Heiser. And in Europe, they were walking. So I think there's so many, and Goldsworthy making, such beautiful ephemeral work that was captured, by the photograph and then probably gone, often very, very soon. So absolutely, Goldsworthy's work is very important to me. He was in one of the shows that I was in Denmark, and that was a thrilling time. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Karen? I'm really interested in your thoughts about. I know you've mentioned your sustainability, it seems like a band that's really neat to sustain things or to make people aware of the environment and how we alter our environment. But I'm also interested in what do you feel about preserving your own work? Because sometimes I feel like, all the things we use to preserve our work are really toxic. I mean, at least if you go to like a craft store, it's like, you can spray this, it's like probably worse than smoking cigarettes. I mean, but at the same time, like say you're working with clay, it's going to crack maybe or not. I mean, it's like, but then again, you want to sort of like be sustainable, but also, preserve the message. So I'm wondering about that nexus between how you can preserve some permanent nature of how you've altered the environment and yet still, you know, be sustainable to the environment. I think that's a sort of interesting, you know, dialectic.
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge, isn't it? I always ask myself the questions, is the trade-off worth it? I mean, you put a human being down anywhere on the planet, we have to have shelter, we have to have food, we have to interact with the environment. So every day we have these moments where we have to ask the question of, what is it? What am I doing with it? Is that Luciano Fabro, the famous Arte Povera artist and theoretician, said, is what I'm doing serving what I'm doing? And I think that's a very amazing question for all of us about everything. So I do always ask myself that. For example, I would have loved to have made that 26-foot-long sculpture using egg tempera paste, but it simply wasn't possible. So I chose to use polyvinyl acetate, even though it is a petroleum derivative. It is biodegradable, but I don't consider it I consider it the best choice possible now, but I'm always looking for that better choice. Since 1987, so this is the 30th year, I didn't show any of these, but I've made walks in the landscape where I locate natural pigments. I usually have a little bag and a spoon and some Ziploc bags. If I don't, I'll wrap the pigments up in leaves and stick them in a pocket. But I've made these drawings using found pigments and water or spit or dry from a memory of each walk. And only in 2014 did I start using egg tempera, which of course is a time-honored material that artists have used for centuries. And I really did that with an eye. I mean, the plain ones are fine. They're delicate sometimes. But I began that practice using the egg tempera with an eye towards sustaining the work longer and being able to make larger work as well. So I don't know, does that begin to?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I'm interested partially for my own health and for everyone's health and also for the environment. Because sometimes, like, you know, you go to Michael's, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna buy this permanent, like, finish varnish to, like, make sure the paint stays on the canvas. And I hate spraying. I honestly hate spraying. Because I'm like, this is getting in people's lungs. People are getting all sorts of, you know, their alveoli are probably freaking out, you know, like, oh my gosh, give me some air. You know?
You certainly need to protect yourself by wearing a nice double-barrel respirator, and which is not comfortable and not fun, but if you're going to be a painter, you need to do that.
Yeah.
You need to investigate all the materials that you use and make sure that you feel comfortable breathing them. And I think you also need to, if you're sharing a studio, you need to think about the other people in the studio. It's a question of a lot of research. It's just like reading those labels in the grocery store.
Yeah, it is. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a question for Don. So I really find interesting how you started with your artwork in a sketchbook.
Need one of your devices, you got one?
We could make one.
I'll try to speak louder, sorry. I find it interesting how a lot of your artwork, you start up in a sketchbook, which for artists like myself, I always start off with a line work sketchbook and how you like your even in a line work sketchbook, you can still tell what you're going for, and I love how you talk about your use of spacing. What kind of like inspired you to start off in something like in a line sketchbook other than like a clear pad sketchbook? Like what made you want to start off with that instead of like something else?
That's what I was referring to as the sacred cow. I probably didn't make that very clear. The white paper is so beautiful, and so is raw canvas, and I could just watch it and look at it and take great pleasure in it. And so the line paper actually breaks the sacredness right off the bat. And the perforations, the line down the middle, the lines across, it's a notepad, a steno pad, you know, that flips up like so. And I liked it because of the lines, because it kind of broke the pristine quality of the paper. It eliminated it. And it was, you can buy those for like 99 cents some places. And I like that ease of it. And I've taken them on planes and put them in the pocket, and the plane's flown away with them. But it's not like the value of the paper or the sacred cow, but the drawings are kind of important, I guess.
Would you say the lines in the line paper help you like to know what your piece is going to look like?
It does, because I even have a couple down there that uses those. Like, I don't know if you noticed them, but I'll skip a couple of lines, margins, and then color in, you know, the next one. So yeah, they've actually worked as a structural aid for me. Now, when I started out, again, back to the KU days, I would draw my foot every night before I went to sleep for a year, regardless of my condition. And that was just a little black sketchbook, you know, with plain white pages in it, that nothing, and I just draw my foot. And it just, I don't know, it sort of morphed from there. But I've been doing those sketchbooks for all these years. I have going on 50, 60, 70, I don't know how many of them, and I don't know how many of them are still in my life.
All right, well, thank you.
Yep. Did I answer it?
Yeah, you did. Like, I definitely can relate to that because I've started out with sketch paper.
You know what? The thing is, too, about sketching and drawing, you can do it in just while you're sitting here. You can do it on a bus. You can do it while you're waiting for your food to cook. Or you can do it anytime, anywhere you want. And it's just right there for you. And I really like that about it.
Yeah, the
About
other
drawing.
comment is that the sketch doesn't always, it's not always that the sketch starts and then a painting happens. Sometimes the painting happens and then the sketch happens.
Oh, no, I never look at a sketch to make a painting,
Right.
ever.
Because, you know, sketching is always.
It's like it's part of what one does, but it's separate acts.
Because sketching can be looked at in different ways. Sketching can be looked at as a prototype to a painting or drawing, or it could be.
Yeah, I think there's definitely relationships. That's clear to me, but I don't try to do one. Although once in a while I'll see something in one of the sketchbooks and wish I was that sloppy or that scribbly or that unattentive or something, you know, like some way to mess with it. The painting, I mean.